All right, let's talk about these. So the first two, you are asked whether they are adjacent or non-adjacent. What does it mean to be adjacent? Yeah, they share a side and a vertex. So which one or two has the same side? You know, they're sharing a side. Two. Okay, so this one's adjacent. Are they adjacent in number one? No, these are non-adjacent. Now, yesterday we learned a new name for something like number one. Do you guys remember what those angles were called? Vertical angles. Good. Now, if it would have asked vertical angles or linear pairs, number one would be a vertical angle, but that's not what it asked. So, number two, what are those? I just said it. Anyone catch it? Linear pair. Good. Two angles that come together to form a line are a linear pair. But, again, they just asked us adjacent or non-adjacent. So there you go. What are your questions? All right, next, supplements. Those add to 180. So what would you add to 67 to get 180? 100 and what? 13. What would you add to 148 to get 180? 32. Good. Any questions on this? All right, put your name on those. You get 5 points a day for those. And I give you all the answers, so it's basically like 5 free points if you just show up and do what you're told. Other questions? All right, we are doing some notes today. Here is the number, the title, and the objective. Today's lesson and tomorrow's lesson are what I think a little bit tricky. It's a lot of reading and sort of more like interpreting the language than doing a bunch of math. So I'm going to try to do your notes and your homework with you together, but that requires you to participate and to move quickly. So if you guys will participate and move quickly, we can probably get your homework done as a class. Today's lesson is Section 2.5, it's all about if-then statements and deductive reasoning. So our objective is to use if-then statements and laws of logic. Here's some vocab for you. I'm going to take just a little piece out. You'll have a bunch of if-then statements in your notes before the end of today, so you can skip the example. But everything else you do need to write. I know it's a lot. I'm sorry about that. Today is just a lot of writing, like I said. So hang in there. Write these. We'll talk about them in a couple minutes. So most of what we're going to do today involves if-then statements. So what is an if-then statement? It's a statement with two parts. The if part is the hypothesis. The then part is the conclusion. Here's an example. If it is cold, then I will wear my coat. So, if it's cold outside, you're going to put your coat on. Pretty logical series of steps there. We call the first part the hypothesis, the if part, and then the end, the conclusion, that's the then part. Just like in a story, the conclusion is the end. Same thing in an if-then statement, the conclusion is the part at the end. And then everything we're doing today is the process called deductive reasoning. We're using facts, definitions, accepted properties, and laws of logic to make a logical argument. Any questions on your vocab? Here's example 1. I just want you to write the if-then statement. You don't need to write this part down here. I'm going to just show you an easier way that's going to save us some writing time. Right, what's at the top? Yep, if I pass the driving test, then, notice that's a then with an E, not an A. Then I will get my driver's license. Alright, so the way I want you to do these, I want you to box in the first part, the if part. Do you remember what the beginning is called? Hypothesis. So put a box around it, label it hypothesis. That'll just save you from writing it twice. The rest of it, then I will get my driver's license, is called the what? Conclusion. Good. So I don't care if you want to box them both in, if you want to circle them both, if you want to underline one of them once and the other one twice, but somehow indicate to me which part is the hypothesis and label it hypothesis, and which part is the conclusion and label it conclusion. Alright, here's example 2. Do not start writing anything. Write 2 and then an A. We're just going to go right to the answer. You don't need to write these parts. These aren't really that important. The if-then part that we come up with is the important part. So I want to use the words if and then when I rewrite the statement. So every duck on the pond is hungry. So the if part is the part that has to happen first. If what? Where does the duck have to be? Yeah, so if the duck is on the pond, then what do I know about that duck? It's hungry. Good. Write what I'm writing. Yes, you do not need to write out the problem, but write the if-then statement that we are coming up with. So, you don't really need the word every because we cover that by changing it to if. So if the duck is on the pond, that includes every single duck on that pond, right? Every single duck on that pond we can conclude is hungry. So it has to be on the pond first, then we know that it's hungry. What are your questions on the first one? Part B, I will go running if it does not snow. So the if part is the one that has to happen first. And again, you should be writing what I'm writing. You don't have to write the problem, but write the if-then statement. So what has to happen first? So you'll go running first no matter what happens with the weather? Yeah, you need the not snowing part first before you know that you're going to go running. So we're actually going to start in the back this time. If it does not snow, comma, then what will happen? I will go running. What are your questions on part B? The red if-then statement. Alright, the last one, part C. I will buy the CD if it costs less than $15. So if, what has to happen first? Good, so you said if it costs less than $15. Well, what's the it? The CD. Typically, you don't use it until you establish what it is. So if the CD costs less than $15, then what are you going to do? I will buy it. Great. What are your questions on these 3 if-then statements? So here are 2 law logics. You got to write it all. So the first one is the law of detachment. So write law of detachment and then write down what it is. We'll talk about it in a second. The second one, you pronounce that syllogism. So the next one is the law of syllogism. So we're going to use these 2 laws today. to rewrite some more if-then statements. So I'll give you a couple minutes to write it. I know it's a lot. And then we'll talk about exactly what they mean. Alright, so the first one we're going to look at is the law of detachment. The law of detachment just says that if the hypothesis is true in an if-then statement, then the conclusion is also true. So let's go back to the duck one. The duck's on the pond. The if-then statement was, if the duck is on the pond, then it is hungry. So if I tell you there's a duck on the pond, you can assume that that duck is hungry. Any questions on that one? It's basically saying if the first part's true, the second part has to be true as well. The next one's the law of syllogism. The law of syllogism actually involves kind of like 3 steps. So the P, Q, and R represent different parts of the statement. So we can go back to the duck one. It would say, if the duck is on the pond, then it is hungry. Then the next statement starts with the way the first one ends. So if the duck is hungry, then I will feed it some bread. Now, what this law says is basically you can cut out the middleman. You could say something like, if the duck is on the pond, then I'm going to feed it some bread. So you can sort of skip the like, he's hungry, and if he's hungry, then this is going to happen. So again, it's just kind of cutting out the middleman. So another example would be like the CDs. So if the CD is less than $15, then I will buy it. If I buy a new CD, I will listen to it on the way home. So you could say, if the CD is less than $15, I'm going to listen to it on the way home. You can cut out the middleman where you're buying the CD and go right to the end. If the first thing happens, all the way at the end, what's going to happen? So again, it's sort of like 3 statements, and you can cut out the middle guy, go straight from the beginning to the end. Any questions? All right. Let's see what we can do. Don't write any of this down. Just write number 3. This is basically like a multiple choice question. We are using the law of detachment to decide which one is correct. So remember, in the law of detachment, the hypothesis has to be true first. So, in part A, if 2 angles form a linear pair. So we are looking for this information, 2 angles that are forming a linear pair. Then they are supplementary. Then they tell me that angle 3 and angle 4 form a linear pair. So did they give me the hypothesis? And we concluded that those angles are supplementary. Alright, so that one seems legit. Let's read the second one and see if it works out as nicely. If not, then I know my answer is A. If 2 angles form a linear pair, so we still have that part, we need to know they're a linear pair first, then we can conclude that they're supplementary. Then they tell us right away that angle 3 and angle 4 are supplementary. So did they give us the conclusion first? Or did they give us the hypothesis first? We want the hypothesis to be first. Which one did they give us first? The conclusion. Does it work that way? No, that's like working in reverse. It doesn't work backwards for if-then statements. You have to have the hypothesis first before you can have the conclusion. All right? So the answer here is A. So in your notes, I don't even want you to write it down. Just write 3, write A, and circle the A. That way, if it's on your notebook quiz, you can just say that the answer was part A. Again, I want to make sure we have some time to go over your homework, so I don't want to force you to do a ton of writing, so we'll just shorten this one up a little bit. Just write 3 and then the letter A. Don't write out all the if-then stuff. Just 3 and then A, and then we'll move on. Don't write anything. I just want you to write the answer. So write number 4, and then we're going to see if we can use the law of syllogism. Remember, syllogism is where you cut out the middleman. So this says, if Sarah saves enough money, she can buy a concert ticket. If she buys a concert ticket, then she will see her favorite band. So which one's like the middle guy, the repeater? Yes. Are you trying to answer or stretching? Which one's the repeater? Which one's in there twice?
The ticket thing.
Yeah, the buying of the ticket, right? So it's saying she buys the ticket and then she buys the ticket. Okay, so that's the part we can sort of cut out on here. So I'm going to start at the very beginning. If Sarah, this is the part I want you to write, saves enough money, what's going to happen in the end? Cut out the middleman. What's going to happen? If she saves enough money, what's the whole point? Then she can see her favorite band. We don't even need to know that she bought a ticket. It's just kind of assumed. If she's at the concert, she bought a ticket, right? So she's got to save the money, and then boom, she gets to see her favorite band. And again, that's the law of syllogism. You're just cutting out the middleman. You guys have questions? Everybody ready for number 5? Here is number 5. So again, you can just wait. We'll write it out together. It's the exact same type of problem. It says, if the ball is thrown at the window, it will hit the window. If the ball hits the window, then the window will break. So what part can we cut out? Which part? Yeah, the hitting the window. We don't need to repeat it. All right? Let's just go straight from the beginning to the end. If the ball is thrown at the window, then what's going to happen? The window will break. Good. Do you guys have any questions on this? So we are just going to focus on the evens. Which ones are even? Very. 2, 4, 6, 8. So I'm just going to cross out 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, and so on. So you don't accidentally do those. All right, so the first section says identify the hypothesis and the conclusion of the if-then statement. So in number 2, if two angles form a linear pair, then the angles are supplementary. Which one's the hypothesis? Good, the beginning. If two angles form a linear pair, so circle that and label it hypothesis. What's the conclusion? Then the angles are supplementary. Good, just the end. All right, skip number 3, go to number 4. If the measure of an angle is 90 degrees, then the angle is a right angle. What's the hypothesis? The first part, so if the measure of an angle is 90 degrees, the second part is the conclusion. Then the angle is a right angle. Questions? All right. Skip 5, go to 6. The directions say write the statement as an if-then statement. So I need the word if, whatever has to happen first. Then I'm going to add the word then, and whatever happens next. So your team will travel to the state competition. Wait, where is it? Hold on. Your team will travel to the state championship game if you win the district championship. Sorry, I was Trying to read it too quick. So what has to happen first? If what?
If your team.
So you have to win the district one first before you go to state? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if your team wins the district, oops, ran out of space, the district championship, then what's going to happen? So after you win the district championship, what are you going to do?
You travel to the state championship game?
Yeah, then your team will travel to the state championship game. Good, that was a long one. So just think of which one has to happen first. First you got to win the district championship, then your team's going to go to state. All right, I'm sort of out of space, so I'm going to squeeze number 8 in over here. Number 8 says, school will be canceled if it snows 6 inches overnight. So what has to happen first? If what? If it snows, how much? 6 inches overnight. Then what? What's going to happen? School will be canceled. Great, so it has to snow first. So if it snows 6 inches overnight, then school will be canceled. Does anyone need help with either of those? They're kind of hard to read up there. Again, I'm trying to just squeeze them in. If you run out of space and want to write them on the back or write them on a separate sheet of paper, that's fine. Any questions? Before we move on, once we start number 10, I'm going to erase all the previous stuff to give us a little bit of clean space. So make sure you get these down before we go on. All right, again, we can skip the odd. We are on number 10. This says, using the law of detachment, what can you conclude from the true statements? So, number 10 says, if the measure of an angle is between 0 and 90 degrees, then the angle is acute. So the first thing we want to establish is that it's between this range, and then we can conclude that it's acute. Alright, so they give us the information the measure of an angle is 51 degrees. So have we satisfied the hypothesis? Is that between 0 and 90? Yeah, once you've satisfied the hypothesis, you can conclude the conclusion is true. So this angle is... what is it? The angle is true? The angle is false? That doesn't make any sense. Angles can't be true and false. The angle is what? Tell me what the conclusion says. The angle is? Okay. So it's 51 degrees. That satisfies the first part. So we now know that what's true? It's acute. Yes. You guys are making it harder than this is. I told you these are actually kind of easy. So once you satisfy the first part, just read the second part and you know that it's true. So it satisfied the 0 to 90, so we can conclude that it is an acute angle. Alright? Questions? Skip 11. Now, we're using the law of syllogism here, so we're cutting out the middleman for 12 and 14. If the perimeter of a square is 12 centimeters, then the length of the side of the square is 3 centimeters. If the length of a side of the square is 3 centimeters, then the area of the square is 9 square centimeters. So who can we cut out? What's the middleman? Which part? The length of the side is what?
The length of the side of the square. 3 centimeters.
Very good. We can cut out the length of the side of the square is 3 centimeters both times. Alright? We can just go from beginning to end without the middle. So we need to start with if the perimeter of a square is 12 centimeters, then what? We can automatically know what? What's the final conclusion here? Very good. Then the area of the square is 9 square centimeters. That's the symbol for square centimeters. Good. So again, the law of syllogism is just cutting out that middleman. If this, then this. If this, then that. You're cutting out the middle guy. So if the beginning, then jump all the way to the end. We don't need those middle steps. All right. Again, we're just doing those evens, so jump down to 14, and that should be our last one because 15 is odd. So this says, rewrite the following advertisement slogan as an if-then statement. Want to look younger? Try our Cream Day Youth for 30 days. So I'm going to rewrite that advertisement using the words if and then. So if what? What has to happen first? Yep, if you want to look younger, then try our cream. Good. Now you wouldn't take the product name out of an advertisement, so make sure you say the whole thing. Our Cream Day Youth for 30 days. Very good. Now they're called if-then statements for a reason because they have the word if in it and the word then in it. So make sure you have if and then in both of your statements. Do you guys have any questions? Would you like to do the odds?
No.
Okay. You don't have to do the odds. If you want extra practice, go for it. But the evens are just fine. So if you're done, go ahead and put your name on it and you can turn it in.